All right, the final game between effOrt and Sharp. So far, this has actually been a fantastic series. I came into this expecting second-rate play and just lots of small mechanical mistakes, but so far both players have really delivered in terms of strategy, in terms of mechanics, in terms of decision making and tactics. Everything has on from the series has honestly been absolutely fantastic. So we are going to be going into game 4. It says it was a best of 3, but they played 4 games, so I don't know. Maybe this was a fun consolation match. Anyhow, there is so much to be said about the last 2 games. I could go on and on and on, but the main thing to note is it's really cool to see how these players play the late game in ZBT, because late game ZBT always ends up in this weird spot where Terran, basically they have enough map control with their leftover bio that they can expand like crazy and switch into mech at the same time, and then it's just a matter of weathering the Zerg storm until you can get your other high ground main and start producing units on the high ground, fortify all of your bases, and then at that point the Zerg just kind of starves out. There have been some attempts by Zerg players to circumvent that by going for queens, trying to trade cost efficiently with queens and break tank lines that way. But that's not 100%. It's not 100% reliable. That's something that Larva invented and has been using very heavily, but it still hasn't been proven to be very effective. Otherwise, Zerg players are just finding different timings that they can try to attack before the mech army gets in full force. Sometimes they'll go for a big Overlord drop with Ultralisk in the middle of the map to try to break it. Sometimes they'll go for early drops with a Defiler and a Lurker into like 2 different places, things like that. But what we see from these 2 players has been a very, very creative play, very different approach to the late game. So Sharp, instead of doing the standard thing where you just kind of sit back and once you switch into mech mode, you just sit back and don't do anything, we see him still being very, very aggressive with his vultures. He does vulture drops, all kinds of things like that. He even did a Goliath drop in one of the games. So he stays very aggressive into the late game with all kinds of harassment, and it pulls a lot of resources from the Zerg player who wants to be moving forward, who wants to be breaking the Terran. On the other hand, we also saw effOrt go for a very different style, where instead of trying to just blast out a ton of units and kill his opponent right away, he's just focused on small groups of Lings and Defilers to start pushing the Terran back and find advantages on the map, and maybe even get a little bit of economical damage. And then all of a sudden he put it from 0 into 1,000 miles per hour. Just went straight into 12 Ultras moving out across the map with tons and tons of Lings streaming behind, and managed to just completely break his opponent. And it's really cool to see these different styles kind of clash against each other, especially when we're so used to seeing ZBT played a certain way every single time. But getting into this game, let's go ahead and talk about the openings. It's the normal opening for effOrt. He's going to be going for 3-hatch lair, which is probably going to turn into mutas. But meanwhile, Sharp has gone back to that 2 racks opening that he did in the second game. This is, if you remember correctly, this was a particular style that allowed him to go for a very quick attack. And actually, effOrt is going to be going for a Ling speed all-in. I think he actually got Ling speed before lair, so he's going to be going very, very aggressive in just a moment with these Lings, trying to deal some serious damage to his opponent. And Sharp doesn't know this is coming. He doesn't have any defense that is natural other than these 3 Marines. And if effOrt goes in just a second, sorry, never mind, he does have a couple things up on the ramp, so he's in okay shape. And actually, with that supply depot, Sharp is actually in a really fantastic spot. It's so hard to actually get units up there. And there's the medics out as well already, so kind of unfortunately a hard counter to this build. effOrt is going to have to play a little bit from behind because he made so many lings. Now he doesn't have a lot of drones. For a second there, I thought Sharp was playing greedy because I only saw the three Marines out in front. Maybe that was a bait, I'm not sure. But to some degree, it does also slow down this initial push. Like I said, this initial push is designed to hit before Mutos actually come out. But because effOrt did this very early aggression, and because he has a lot of leftover lings still, it allows him to continue to put pressure on Sharp and prevent the push from coming out while the Mutos are still morphing. So I really like this play overall. Maybe it's not as much of a hard counter build as I originally suspected, but pretty soon effOrt is going to have to start those Mutalisks, and he really wants to make sure that he has enough larvae to just go straight into 9 Mutalisks right away. Sharp is being very cautious. He really doesn't want to get caught out by gigantic lings around. Even though he has these 2 fire bats, he's just being very, very cautious, doesn't want to make any sort of mistake. And I think that's understandable, but at the same time, you can't be too cautious. You have to put some pressure on the Zerg, especially if you go for this opening. Really nicely done by effOrt, finding small advantages. Managed to get into the main and the natural at the same time. Picked off at least 2 SCVs, I saw. Looks like a third one is going to be going down in the main. So this is well played by effOrt, just getting a small advantage. But that is the last of his map control. Without those links now, he is basically forfeiting all of his map control, allowing Sharp to finally push out across the map confidently. But the Mutalisks are out, so this is a huge boon for effOrt. And he's actually going to just go ahead and take the third base now. Again, taking the third base very early, and it's been working out for him. Most Zerg players these days tend to take later third bases because they feel like going against heavy Marine medic pressure can be very difficult to deal with if you take an earlier third. But for whatever reason, effOrt seems to have found the answer, and the answer is just go for the faster third. Ends up being better for you anyway. And lots of SCVs going down, honestly. This is actually insane how many SCVs have gone down. Normally you want to target the bio because you're trying to shave down the units as much as possible, but in this game so far, there's been a very deliberate attempt by effOrt to kill off as many SCVs as possible. And I think that's a really smart play because that's going to allow him to... he feels confident enough that he can crush the incoming bio that might be coming across the map. And he's already got his lurker tech on the way, so he's in pretty good shape. I would like to see Sharp move out across the map. I feel like he's playing a little bit too safe. He's sustained a lot of damage, but at the same time, a lot of that is due to the fact that he's just been playing so safe. Mutalisks killing off those 2 fire bats that we're going to go try to scout for the third base. And Sharp is really just left in the dark. There's not really anything for him to do. He's really far behind at this point, only producing off of 3 wrecks and still taking damage from these Mutalisks. This is really, really bad for him, honestly. He's going to try to get some missile turrets back up, but at this point in time, he's sustained so many SCV casualties that his economy is just in complete shambles compared to effOrt's. effOrt is doing absolutely fantastic in the economy department. To some degree, this reminds me of the older days when Jaedong would basically just win with Mutalisks, keeping the Zerg player just absolutely trapped in their base. And here comes a big engagement. effOrt trying to shave off as many of these units as possible before they get across the map. And I really like this. This is one of those things that I mentioned a little bit last game, is it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and engage the Terran army right as they move out, because you know that you'll have reinforcements by the time they get across the map. So it's okay, you end up shaving off half the army, and by the time the army arrives at your third or your natural, you already have reinforcements to deal with it. You're taking advantage of the defender's advantage. Really cool to see. So more Mutalisks coming out. effOrt is just doing a really good job of always replacing his Mutalisks. He is relying so heavily on these mules to do a lot of damage that he always really needs to replace them. Otherwise, he'll find himself unable to really stem the tides of this by moving out across the map. Unfortunately, he's going to lose 2 overlords for free, and that's going to supply block him for a little bit. But he's going to go for a counterattack in the meantime. With only 5 racks up, there really isn't a lot of reinforcements that can really help him out here. But again, targeting the SCVs, he really doesn't care about the Marine count. I wonder if that's just because this is a 5 racks compared to a 3 racks. Oh, sorry, this is a 3 racks compared to a 5 racks. Normally with 5 racks, you want to shave off as many units as possible, but it seems like he's much more worried about shaving off the economy and preventing it from... Oh, big mistake there. But luckily only loses 1 Mutalisk out of that. It wasn't the worst mistake possible, but it was pretty brutal. Either way, he's kept his opponent pinned back for quite a long time. Again, losing Mutalisk kind of cost inefficiently. I don't know if that one was worth it, especially for just a 100 mineral missile turret. Not a great trade there. But he's already got his 4th base up and running. He's actually taking a 4th base, and Sharp hasn't even moved out across the map. So when you compare this to normal things, oh, we see Guardians! We see Guardian Morphs. That's really sick. So when you compare this to standard ZVT, which you normally see, it never goes this well for Zerg. It almost always ends up being an absolute bloodbath early on. But this has overall been very, very good. Sharp is going to try to break this lurker line with just 1. There's the GG though. He realizes that he's allowed his opponent to get the other base. And here come the Guardians.